So, as promised, I would make an update based on these lights and these two here in the center. What I've changed is that this light is now wired from the actual ambient light connector that is used in the factory RAV4s with the factory ambient lighting. There's actually a connector behind here, and then there's also another connector behind here. I'm going to show you how to get to that. So the first step is to actually remove this shift knob, and you're going to need a screwdriver. Let's see. So the first thing to do is to put the car into on without starting the engine, then putting the transmission into neutral while keeping the parking brake engaged, and then I'm going to remove this clip right here on the transmission knob. Right here. So the shifter knob, there's this little clip right over here, and the same thing on the other side. Just use something firm or metal to pop it out. Sometimes I just use the screwdriver and I'll pop it out, and then you just have to pull it out from here without dropping it in the transmission tunnel. Then you can put it back into park. You can remove this. You can shut down the car. And now I would also suggest opening and closing the door so it thinks you left, and then you won't get a fault when you disconnect the electronic parking brake. So I just stick my fingers in here. I just pull it up. Okay. And then that will then release the controls for the electronic parking brake and the drive mode selector. So then there are two connectors down here. One of these is for the parking brake and the other the drive mode selector. So once those are connected, then you now have access to a few things in here. And what you're going to have to do is remove the storage tray. It might be a wireless charging one in your case. As you can see, here's the connector for the wireless charger that I don't have. But you can just let that dangle that way. Then what you're going to need to do is use a 10mm right over here. In fact, let me go get an extension first. Alright, so now that I have an extension, this is just a 10mm. Just need to loosen this. And the nice thing about having this storage shelf light right up here, I can just put all the parts right in this storage shelf. So once this is removed, it also has a washer. Then I'm going to need to take this out. And this is difficult. Sometimes you can get away with just pulling it off. Sometimes you might need to get a trim removal tool. But the way it comes off is very difficult. You have to pull it straight off, but I'm going to get a trim removal tool and just pry it from the inside. Just get it in here, and then you can get this thing out. This one is perhaps the more finicky one to get out, but it will come out eventually, like that. And then just disconnect it from here. This connector right here. And now it should look like this. So, what you need to do now is, since I unbolted this silver trim piece can come off. But first, now with this all exposed, you can open the center console, and you can see that there's this gap here. So first things first, let's try to remove the silver trim piece here. The easiest way that I found is to actually try to pull up on this this piece of the center console like that, and then that also loosens this up as well. And you can separate this. And then once this is loosened, you can also remove the center console. I mean the cup holders. And then once the cup holders are removed, you really just need to get this loose. You don't need to take the whole thing out. I guess you can if you wanted to, so I can put this back in here like this. And I can take the whole thing out like that. And then move this out of the way. And now I can get this out. In order to get this out, this just pops out from these clips over here, like that. And then in here you will find the connector for the ambient lights. I believe this is a computer for either a drive recorder or the airbag computer or something serious. I don't know what it says, Toyota and Continental, but this is a serious computer, don't mess with that. What you do want to mess with is now that you've gotten this trim piece off, and it'll look a little scary when you have all the center console pieces out, but really all you need is to get this loose, to adhere the light strip here, fish the wire through the hole that is already there, and then just follow the wire back to where it came from. This little connector right here. When I first took this apart, it was taped like this from the factory because this isn't used. So it was just taped like this and it was just sitting there. I cut the tape so then I can get this exposed, and I back probed it with the LED lights. They still work, so if I open the door, you can see that sometimes it's a little finicky, but there they go. Now they're working. So you really just have to get them in there firmly and zip tie them to make sure that they work. Now for these lights over here, this is the connector. So I removed the cup holders. This is the connector, and you don't want to confuse it with this one over here. This connector sits right there. So as soon as you pull the ambient lights out, just like the Footwell lights, there are holders for the Footwell lights if the connector is unused, and that's where it sits. So this is where it usually sits. And again, what I really did is, because this is just two trim pieces, this trim piece out here and the cup holder, I just fished it in that way, and there's a bit of a gap. The gap is increased because I was removing it, but the gap is fairly small with the wiring. I guess the better way would just be to drill a hole through here, and you can have the wire through that, which you can do. The factory light is just a hole right here. The factory, they just drill a hole right over here and install a light right there. But the connector, as soon as you pull this out, it will be right there. And this is the connector. This is the right one. This is the wrong one. Some may get confused. Right here, this is the USB ports. So inside the center console, the USB ports are right over here. So you don't need to disconnect this. These, I think, are also extra. This is just, this 12 volt is powered only when the car's on. This is connected to the actual ambient light circuit. So just need to get the right one. The ambient light connector, if you have it, will be plugged in right there when you pull out the cup holders. This is the wrong one. This one is connected. I think this is a spare that is used on lower trim models that only have the cigarette lighter for the rear passengers. I believe that's what this is for. But this is the wrong connector. This is using the wrong circuit. Now, let's put it back together. So, firstly, put this in here. everything aligned. And as you can see, once everything is back into place, the gap is fairly small. And they still work, obviously. To put this back in its place, just going to adhere it like that. I don't really know where's like a good place to put the connector. I just kind of just let it live there. Oh, hold on. Let's open the door and close it again so that the ambient lights work. But just push it back in, just like that. Make sure you have the climate control connector still exposed. This is its little spot that it lives in. And then of course, let's put this in the center so that I can get the silver trim pieces in. You can disconnect them. I don't know why I've always found these connectors to be very difficult to disconnect, because it has this holder right here. Right here, this holder seems to be a challenge. This holds all the wires in there. I don't know why this is so difficult, but that's hard to take out. And then this goes in here. It's just like puzzles. Pull this out. And remember, you want this silver trim piece on top of the cup holders. This is why you needed that 10mm, was to move the silver trim piece out. The silver trim piece may separate from the black piece underneath that you need to remove in order to remove this. So don't be too worried, just put it back together. It just snaps in like that. And now we can put this in here. This just goes in. It snaps in like that. Now let's reconnect the climate controls. Of course, plug it in before reconnecting it. And then that just snaps in. And of course, make sure that these are all off. Okay. And then I'm gonna put the 10mm back in here. Sometimes there's this little silver thing. It's kind of like a washer, but you have to just move that and then it'll get back in line. Hand tighten before you tighten with tools. Don't cross thread, because this is plastic and metal. It doesn't have to be too tight. And then of course get the connectors for the parking brake and the drive mode selector, and then reconnect those back on here. This is connected. You can then just feed this through the shift knob, and this just snaps into place like that. And then we're going to put the transmission into neutral, so then it's, well, actually you could just do this if you wanted to. You don't need to put it in neutral. I just find it to put it in neutral much easier when you're removing it. And then of course you have to put this retention spring in the slot. So feed it from the front for this shift knob. And that's where it will lock onto. So lock the clip in, make sure that the shift knob is all the way down, and then just push the clip until you hear it click. There you go. Now it's in there, and pull up on it, make sure it doesn't come up, and then just move the leather thing right there. Start the car, make sure the shifter still works, and that the electronic parking brake still works. And then of course the drive mode selector, and then everything still works and the climate control still works. Now let's move on to the Footwell lights. I'll start with the passenger side, it's a little bit easier. camera on my phone, I have an iPhone 10. It doesn't really show it as that bright, but it is much brighter in person, I've noticed. But if you just look, it's just a little light. Let me go and remove the trim piece so you can see what it looks like. So this is what the light looks like. It's in the exact same shape as the OEM. For the cars that do not have the Footwell lights, this connector is sitting right here. So let me show you how to install it. So this is a universal light that Toyota used in many different Toyota cars. It doesn't really look like that it'll fit initially, but trust me, it does. Oh gosh, I need to fix my ambient lighting wires. But the light, the plug, when there's no light here, will sit right over here. And that's where this plug was living its entire life. As you can see, this is the cable that goes up to this ambient light strip. And I just use this exact same thing. But this is much brighter than the factory light, which is extremely dim. But this light, I think you can use it in a Camry, in a Previa, in a Prius. There are a bunch of different Toyotas that use this shape, and they just snap in to this plastic piece like this, just like that. And that's how they sit inside. And of course, installation is very simple. Once you snap it in, just click everything into place. And then of course you have this nice ambient light. The driver's side is a little bit more difficult. In order to get to this ambient light, which sits right over here, you have to unscrew it over here and unscrew it over here. For whatever reason, this panel doesn't come off fully like it does in the passenger side. And I think the only reason why is because there's this apparatus over here on the left side that's in the way. But once you unscrew those screws, this can then be unclipped. And this is where the ambient light lives, right there. And as you can see, this cable goes to this ambient light strip up there. But the when you buy these lights, if your car doesn't have the ambient lights, the connector will live right in there. So that's where this is. And I don't know, I think you can unclip it over here and then it'll come out, but it's a little difficult to get this side. I don't know why. This is more difficult than the driver's side, but that's really it. That's the ambient lights are fully complete on this car, and they are in all the same locations as an OEM ambient light setup on a RAV4 Limited, a Limited Hybrid, and the XSE. In America, at least. I think it might be different. I think like in Australia, the Cruiser model, which is similar to what we have as an XSE, the Blacktone XSE, no, the Blacktone Prime has these ambient lights. The Blacktone, no. The RAV4 PHV Blacktone. That's what they call the RAV4 XSE in Japan. Has these ambient lights, but they're all in the same places as they would be in the OEM. I don't know why. These wires are a little finicky sometimes. You just have to adjust them and make sure that you tighten them so that they don't black out. What does it look like pitch dark at night? Well, let's start the car. I think it's probably just because the carpet is black, so it's kind of hard for the light to reflect off of it. But, you know, as you can see, this is the final setup, and it looks basically like the OEM. Now, the part is this, so let me just increase the exposure. And I'm going to put it in neutral, or out of park. You can see how dim it gets. So it has the same dimming effect as the rest of the ambient lights, obviously because it's the same circuit. But this is the finished product, and this is what the whole thing looks like. I just wanted to give you guys an update. I did find out this. So when I go into settings, if I go into vehicle, whoops, not this, vehicle customization and light settings, this might be a problem on why your car may not have the Footwell lights or the ambient lights. If you turn the timer to off, they completely die out. Even when you open the door, it's set to door right now, and the interior auto lock, the interior lights don't run. Even when I shut off the car, the timer is completely just non-existent. So it is possible to control the ambient lights through the touchscreen, which I foolishly did not look at in the last video. So let me turn them back on. But as you can see, the Footwell lights are completely dead. The ambient lights in the center and in the center console and the shelves are completely dead. But that's what happens when you click interior lights, the auto off timer. So, however, if I go back into the light settings and set the timer back to 7.5, 15, or 30, they turn back on. So I'm going to the timer off, and I'm going to put it back to 30 seconds. And now when I open the door, even though it still says door right there, they still turn on and off. So that's a nice feature. You can also manipulate them in TextStream. I plugged in my TextStream cable and ran TextStream on my computer, and you can control these lights using TextStream. There's a setting called Footwell lights on off in the customization settings of TextStream. That can enable and disable the ambient light circuit as well as the Footwell lights. The Footwell lights and the ambient lights, even the ones right here and here, are all in the same circuit. Take a look. So they're all in the same thing, and they all run on the same circuit right here. But this is everything fully done. I've also heard of some situations where the ECUs in some people, some RAV4s just don't work even if you click on in TextStream. I don't know why, but there's this whole situation with the ambient light circuits, and Toyota's been absolute jerks. Like sometimes they'll even include the wiring in some RAV4s, but people could not get them to work for whatever reason. So this isn't guaranteed to work on all RAV4s, but if you're lucky, and if you get 12 to 14 volts on the ambient light circuit, then your car can look like this. But I definitely recommend, for this center light, go the extra mile, remove everything here in the center console so that you gain access to the connector behind the climate controls. That way you don't have to fish two wires into one connector on the right hand side, or possibly even the left hand side. And this one is one that a lot of people omit, but look for that connector behind here, and it just makes it that much more complete. Let's take a look at it from the rear. I mean, look at that. That looks really cool. And just like this extra light here in the center. It doesn't look pretty when you look at it. I'm sure someone else out there will think of a better solution. I'm sure probably the best way would be to order the cup holders with the hole drilled into it from Toyota, and then find some sort of light. Maybe, I mean, come on, Alibaba, please, if you're listening, or some person who makes these Chinese parts in China. If these lights exist for the Footwell, then why not get the bulb for a brighter bulb for this? Because the reason why I went this aftermarket route with the LED light strips is because the factory lights suck. They're extremely dim. I took a look at a RAV4 XSE at a dealership. The lights were extremely dim even at night. So you'd never get this level of impressiveness. They're just way too dim. And then when you put the car into reverse, neutral, or drive, they're just way too dim. Even dimmer when they're already pathetically dim when you get the factory lighting system. So they're too dim in park, and they're basically off in drive. Ridiculous. This looks much better, and it's still pretty bright when you're driving around. You can just see it just looks very impressive. I'd also say go the extra mile for this one right over here. This extra cubby hole, that's how you know someone's did it right. If they actually go the extra mile and illuminate this part right over here. Not just the center console and the right-hand side. Go the extra mile and do this one. It just makes it look even, and it makes it look like you did a good job. But I finally figured out how to do the cup holder light, because the LED light strips that I ordered were a set of 4. So, but now I have the Footwell lights, I have all the ambient lights here, and the cup holder light. This is much better than something like a RAV4 Limited or a RAV4 XSE, in my opinion, because it's just way brighter. But yeah, that's what it looks like. Pretty cool. So since I've had these lights for a few months, what else? Well, the only thing that I really can report is the adhesive is kind of falling apart for this light over here. I don't know why. I think it's because at one point I did have it in front of the hole, and then I moved it behind the hole for whatever reason. So that's falling apart. I don't know how to get the adhesive back. Maybe I just need to order new lights, but that seemed like a waste. The other thing is driving on like really rough roads, specifically like some freeways that have like rather coarse concrete. Because this is just, the wire is fed through a gap between these two pieces, and from the factory, these two plastic pieces are held together really tight. They vibrate a lot and they make an annoying sound on certain roads. The same, sometimes I hear something over here, there's an annoying sound. So probably what would be the better way is to just drill a hole so that you don't hear an annoying sound. But this car now makes vibrating sounds. Very, very specific roads. Not like all the time. This thing doesn't sound like it's falling apart every time you're driving now, but sometimes I can hear this slight vibrating sound because the gap that this wire creates between these two plastic pieces, they sometimes vibrate. I have seen some situations where this light was flickering every now and then. That's why I also took it apart, just to adjust it and make sure everything was okay. But sometimes they flicker. Very, very rarely. So long as you have the lights in there and they're firmly in there, they shouldn't have any problems. But I mean, like, you know, these I'm pretty sure the Footwell light, that one's probably going to be absolutely rock solid because it's in the same shade as the same shape as the OEM light. So that's really the only thing I have to report. It's still really cool and really nice to have. It really changes the whole atmosphere of the car, and it makes it feel so nice inside. I really like it. Looks really cool at night. I'm still very annoyed by that. That's very annoying how it dims, but all Toyotas do that with ambient lights. Even in brand new Toyotas like the Venza and the Sienna, they dim when you put them in drive. Same thing for the Highlander. Not sure why they do that. No other manufacturer does that. I've seen, for example, like the BMW X3, you can go into the navigation system. In vehicle settings, there's an option for the ambient lights to dim at nighttime. What would make a lot more sense, Toyota, is if these ambient lights just dimmed when the headlights were on. Like, for example, oh, I don't know, the gauge cluster and the navigation system. When you turn the headlights on, they dim at night. Why doesn't the ambient lights behave in that same fashion? Or at least have an option to have them be fully bright all the time. I don't know. I think it's just very stupid that they dim, and they dim via the shift position. That's just stupid. But everything else, I really like them. They're much brighter than the OEMs, so the fact that they dim this much doesn't really bother me, because they're just way, way brighter than the OEM lights. The OEM lights were just pathetic. These are incredible. These are really, really bright, and they're very impressive to behold. And that's what I really like. So I'd say do it. It's not that hard. Just take a few plastic pieces apart. It's really not that difficult. When I had all the center console removed, it looks really scary. It's not scary. It's very easy. This is a friendly car. This is a Toyota. Very easy to work on. It won't punish you if you take it apart. These cars are designed very well, very easy to work on, and removing all of this should not be that terrifying. It should be okay.